All right, folks should be able to see my slides. So I'm giving an update on the Hyrax Development Support and Engagement Working Group, the longest and most specifically named working group. This working group got started in March of this year, and it came out of a number of discussions about issues on the development side, potential communication issues, and just some problems and challenges and barriers that I was hearing about in multiple groups from multiple people. So we put this together to figure out how to better support and engage development work in Hyrax. And I think a lot of information has come out of and will continue to come out of this group that will be relevant to all of our technologies. So our charter, our starting goal for this group was that community members who work on Hyrax development and maintenance have identified several chronic issues that must be addressed to protect both Hyrax community code and those who dedicate their time and energy to maintaining it. So the 4 areas were perception that contributing fixes upstream to Hyrax community code is difficult and time consuming. A lack of support by local institutional leadership for turning local fixes into community code, a large and complex code base that was seeing a decline in contributors, and a history of burnout among our community members who take on technical leadership roles. So the group took this code and started working on deciding what the deliverables would be. So here are the folks who were most consistently engaged in this work. Identifying the deliverables and coming up with solutions. And I want to particularly thank Lynette Rail for her strong dedication to this group and huge help to me in connecting me with others and giving me insight into some of the longer running challenges and the things that were working well. And helping to, define things I didn't understand. She was just an absolute superstar of this group and continues to be as we move forward. So thank you, Lynette. So our first deliverable was a process and schedule for 4 developer congresses to be held at regular intervals every year. One thing that a lot of folks noted was that the Dev Congresses really bring a lot of energy and attention and interaction into the community, and we wanted to make sure that those were held often enough. And we also realized that it would be helpful if we leveraged the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group as part of at least 3 of the Dev Congresses. So our process moving forward is that the 3 Dev Congresses, January, May, and September, would be the week after the first week of the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group. That way, anyone who's new to the community and wanted to join the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group for their first week and learn about things like setting up Docker and sort of getting settled in could join that group. And then the next week would be the Dev Congress, and all the folks in the working group could join in. Any folks who were new to the community would already have had some time to learn, and it would bring some extra energy to those Dev Congresses and help new folks to get involved. And then we're also going to keep a fall Congress, hopefully maybe in person again someday, that will be alongside Connect. And our next Congress is November 8th through 12th. And this is a great time, sort of an unconference style way to get some work done, features work, and also maybe maintenance work in any of our technologies. So our second deliverable was an evaluation of current contribution culture, strengths, and weaknesses. So we did this over the course of 3 or 4 different open meetings to discuss challenges and solutions. We sort of focused these meetings on one-time contributions, maintenance work, and features work. And we also talked about the challenges of volunteer leadership in the community. We had a lot of participation from across the community in these meetings. And we came up with a document where we outlined all the challenges, and then we went through it and noted any potential solutions that came out of those groups, and then we talked about it extensively in the working group to think about what we could do that would help to mitigate some of these things, and what were sort of things we couldn't tackle right away but should keep in mind for the future. Our third deliverable was developing new contributor support practices. So the maintenance pledge process came out of this conversation and some other conversations, really comes at some of these development problems from a few different angles. So we're excited to see how that works going into 2022. We identified a real need for more community managed training and improved onboarding processes. So there's a proposed working group to move that kind of work forward. So you'll see some more from us, I think, in the next year as we work on improving those. And we also got the Hyrax maintenance working group involved with reviewing one-off pull requests. These were pull requests that were maybe going unnoticed and contributing to frustration for folks who were trying to make small improvements or move their local improvements forward and not having anyone around to review. So we sort of found a way to more systematically address those issues. We have some other ideas that are still in process. So we've talked about formalizing the idea of a code component specialist process in Hyrax. You'll hear about this more in the coming weeks, but we're looking for ways to take folks who may have specialized understanding, not of the entire Hyrax code base, but of specific components of the code. And then Julie would have a list of these folks as resources for reviewing pull requests and for other ways of contributing to leadership in the community. We're looking at a working group for plugin implementation. There was a working group that wasn't able to get to the implementation phase, I think a year or two ago. So we're looking back at their work to see what can be moved forward, and just generally talking about several ways, small and large, to expand the pool of contributors and reviewers in the code. And our fourth deliverable is recommendations for practices and actions that require commitment from the institutional leadership level. So we've talked a lot about how to talk about the importance of maintenance work, move that kind of work forward. We'll be presenting on our findings at an upcoming partner meeting. The maintenance pledge drive is part of this as well. And we're also just exploring generally, looking for the challenges and the barriers to moving up local fixes into the code. So it's been a great working group. We're hoping to wrap up by the end of this year and hand off some of the work to other working groups who can go more in depth into things like developer onboarding. That is all from me.
Thank you, Heather. Julie, are you ready to share your updates?
Yes, I think I can. Let me share my screen.
Wonderful.
And present. All right, so you can see all of that, I think.
Looks good.
Great, okay. So yeah, hi, my name is Julie Hardesty. I'm a metadata analyst at Indiana University, and I'm the Hyrax product owner. So I'm gonna be giving the updates for both the Hyrax maintenance working group and the Hyrax interest group kind of all together here. So first off, I'm going to start with the Hyrax maintenance working group. And this is the charge for that working group. And that is to support the core maintenance and development of Hyrax. And we do this by addressing bugs and other issues in the GitHub backlog. And we review pull requests. And what we do for maintenance work is not a replacement for community-led development efforts or contributions. So we don't tend to get involved in a lot of new feature development, but that doesn't mean we don't work on new feature development. So it's not a focus for what we're doing. So the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group has the following members for this cycle, and the sprint cycle that we're in right now started in July. So it's a little bit different than what we're going to be having next year. We had 2 cycles this year, January to June, and then this July to December. But we've been doing this in 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So 2-week sprints, and then 2 weeks off, and then another 2-week sprint. Is how we've been doing things all year long, actually. And these folks have been absolutely fantastic to work with, and I'm very thankful for their contributions. And I also have another special thank you again to Tamsin for serving as Hyrax tech lead for so long with the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group, and for being a part of this working group as part of that service as well. That has been invaluable. And I also, at this point in the sprint cycle, we're also getting some participation from Beth Sadler at Princeton University as time allows to work on documentation updates, specifically in the samvera.github.io site. So that is happening as well. So we've got a working group that is pretty steady and has been doing a lot of work. Part of what we wanted to do with this cycle, we talked about this a little bit at Samvera Virtual Connect, is we wanted to try and do more frequent releases and try and make it not such a big reach to do a Hyrax release. And we did that. We've done that a little bit so far in this cycle. So we have had more frequent releases happening. We saw 3.0.2 for Hyrax come out with a variety of bug fixes and dependency updates and some deprecations and other cleanup work. And then we had 3.1.0 that followed onto that, that had enhancements for query optimization, a new rake task for regenerating file derivatives in bulk, and deployment improvements for Docker containers and Helm charts and the DASI internal test app. And then in addition to those 3.x releases, we also had a 2.x release, and that was 2.9.6 that was released. They updated Active Fedora to 12.2. So we've also updated documentation for these releases, both the READMEs and on GitHub. And the samvera.github.io knowledge base site has also been receiving documentation updates related to some of the issues that have been worked on and resolved. So the issue stats, I think I showed this yesterday, so I'm showing it again today for those that didn't see the Hyrax update yesterday, but more issues exist now than what we reported on at Samvera Virtual Connect in the spring. So new things have been reported and new issues have been opened, but the Hyrax Maintenance Working Group, in combination with community members, have also closed 53 Hyrax issues since May. So there's been a lot of activity just in general. And overall, bugs are still going down, which is a good direction, including bugs for 3.x, the 3.x milestone. Priority issues are also being cleared, and we're chipping away at accessibility concerns and documentation needs. And we also, at this point, still have no blocker issues that are alive. So that's great. So with no one in the Hyrax tech lead role at this point, we're continuing through the rest of the cycle that way, which means that our capacity for maintenance work is going to be lower than it has been through December at least. So, but anyone who is interested is welcome to join for the rest of the cycle. You can check in on the Hyrax-WG channel on Slack. And our next sprint begins on Monday, November 1st. We will have stand up at 1 p.m. Eastern, and the Zoom connection info is pinned in that Hyrax WG channel if you are interested in checking in and seeing what's going on and participating. So I also, again, encourage you to consider a pledge of maintenance hours for 2022 for any Samvera technology work, and that includes Hyrax. So for Hyrax maintenance in 2022 for next year, the working group, I think we're going to be continuing with our sprint schedule that we've been doing of 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So that's going to continue and stay consistent. But we will be switching up planning to be based on 3 cycles of work for the year. So January through April, May through August, and September through December. I'll also be considering the pledged hours within those cycles, if that's how the pledges come through for a particular cycle. So who we will have and what we can accomplish with those varying configurations of people. So I'm expecting the maintenance working group to potentially be a little more fluid in terms of who is participating on different sprints or in different cycles. So I'm kind of expecting that, and I think that will actually be a really, really cool way to approach looking at the list of issues that we have in the GitHub backlog and how to tackle those. So the Hyrax maintenance working group will continue with your pledges. So thank you. So I think I will go ahead and move on to the Hyrax interest group. And the Hyrax interest group is a general interest group within the Samvera community. So anyone that is interested in talking about Hyrax, asking questions about Hyrax, welcome to join these meetings. We meet once a month on the second Wednesday, and these meetings are scheduled for 30 minutes. So we try to keep them brief but focused and informative. And they happen right before the Samvera tech call. So we're trying that out as a way to kind of ease, if it's easier for people to get on this right before the tech call, and then the tech call happens and you can switch over to that if that is what you're wanting to do. Our next meeting is on Wednesday, November 10th at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. And there is a separate Slack channel for the interest group, and it's Hyrax-interest-group. We use that for communicating about meetings and having conversation. So the objectives for the Hyrax interest group are, I think the first off is to serve as a place to learn about Hyrax. So if there are things you're wanting to find out about Hyrax, this is a good place to go. It's also a place to consider the Hyrax roadmap. And that's something that I have not been as effective at facilitating, but I've got a little bit more on that in a second here. It also this interest group serves as the home for the Hyrax maintenance working group. So we provide updates. The working group provides updates to the interest group every time it meets about how things are progressing with the working group. So that's also a way to kind of stay in touch with what's happening with the maintenance working group. So what's happened recently since Samvera Virtual Connect in the spring, actually, I think is when we learned that Tamsin was stepping down as Hyrax tech lead, we did work on a description of that Hyrax tech lead position and tried to consider how it might be adjusted to fit the experience and interest of folks in the community who want to be engaged, but don't necessarily have multiple years to dedicate or an all-encompassing mind map of the inner workings of this particular Rails engine. So working on this description, we wanted to consider how the current work of the tech lead could be more distributed in the community. And then this is something from the Hyrax development support and engagement working group. We talked a lot about the concepts that were brought up there, like this idea of a code component specialist who like having a list of folks that we could look to help with pull request review for different areas of the code, that sort of thing. And also how a tech lead role could be focused on a person's area of expertise and how we can welcome that in. So if someone has a lot of experience with deployments or is really well versed in JavaScript or Ruby programming, how could the Hyrax tech lead position fit so that someone with that type of focus would be able to fill the Hyrax tech lead role? So we did a lot of conversations around that, and we do have this position description that may or may not be something we would try to bring about if the Hyrax tech lead role is a particular role that we want to try to fill again. So that's kind of still in the works, but we're still discussing that. We also reviewed the used design principles that were presented by Carla Artin from the Samvera User Experience Interest Group. So it was really great to have the opportunity to see the draft of that and give feedback on the Hyrax perspective of those used design principles. That was very helpful. And then we also reviewed plans for the Samvera Community Vocabulary Manager, which may not be something you've actually really heard all that much about. So it's been something that's been in the works for a while to support metadata property needs for Samvera technology. We know we have some properties that are kind of internal and hanging out there, and there's not really a place where they live in the world. And trying to provide a vocabulary manager where things like those properties could be hosted if we wanted to do that. There's also been some discussion a little bit about controlled vocabularies and that sort of thing, if there are things like that to host for Samvera community needs. So that was something that was discussed. And then, so moving forward, I do want to engage more with roadmap work for Hyrax with the interest group. So I think this is going to be necessary to identify our priorities for Hyrax and figure out how to use the pledged hours most effectively. And I want to send a thanks out to Rachel Lynn and Norm Orsted from DCE for your talk on Monday about using Miro for story mapping. I think that is potentially going to be a really, really useful way to approach this, to do an asynchronous activity for story mapping to help identify priorities within the Hyrax interest group, and maybe looking at the list of issues that we have hanging out and what should the priorities be. So I think there's some interesting things there. So like I said, this will help us plan work based on the pledged maintenance hours that are portioned to Hyrax. So we'll see how all the pledges lay out in terms of the different Samvera technologies. And I think that we can also use the Hyrax interest group if we have a hex sticker design that needs some decisions or approvals. So if you would like to be involved in the Hyrax maintenance working group special edition hex sticker design work, there might be some review work that will be happening in some upcoming Hyrax interest groups. So just a little enticement if you're interested in that. So thank you. Those are the updates that I have for the Hyrax maintenance working group and the Hyrax interest group. So thank you for your time today, and let me know if you have any questions or comments.